Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to gather a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world one character at a time. But I seem to be on a side mission, helping people get going on their Zettelkasten, really get using it, get producing things out of it, and getting comfortable with their Zettelkasten. It's a wonderful tool, and I use it every day, and it means so much to me that it's worth it to be taking this side venture to help you get started. You're telling me by your questions and by your comments that this is working for you, so as long as you have questions, I will do my best to answer them. This is episode 140, the Zettelkasten, the value of a full thought index entry. Now, the thing we're talking about here is you may have noticed, and as many have, when I show my cards, my index entries are quite long, and I think it's enormously valuable to have them that long. And I'm going to go through some of the reasons why I do that and why I think it's well worth the time spent. And the crazy thing is, it doesn't take as long as you might think it takes to do this. So I'm going to switch over to show you a card that's ready to be indexed so that we have something to talk about. Okay, here's the card that is ready to be indexed. I already determined what card number goes on the card, and I used the index to help me figure out which card was appropriate for this card to go with. And it was a very easy search for me because I had this full tagline and the entry in the index was a full tagline. The taglines themselves are of enormous value. I have a card that has a fair amount of information on it. And what I do when I create a tagline like this, what I'm doing is I'm assuring that I have interacted with that information on the card in such a way that I can summarize the thought in that card in a single line. I've found just by experience that the more that this line represents a complete thought, the more valuable the index entry is, the more quickly I can relate to it and to what that card says. I will be able to remember for months, if not years, what that card says just by this tagline entry. It brings the whole card back to me. And it does that in a manner that's totally not present if I were to simply use hashtags. For example, if I said hashtag vitality, hashtag relationship, hashtag value, hashtag balance. That's every word of the tagline except the word must, and yet it has no emotive power. It has no evocative power and has no meaning. It's not a thought, it's just a label. If that tagline is a thought, what's going to happen immediately is that both sides of your brain are going to be engaged. When both sides of your brain are engaged, that's very energizing. When only the verbal side of your brain is energized, that is very draining. So if you want to be energized, that's reason enough right there. And I found that if other side of my brain is not engaged, it doesn't turn off. It goes and has fun with some other thoughts that are distracting. And so not only am I drained, but I'm constantly battling to pull attention back to this card that isn't really telling me anything because the tagline didn't say anything. So what I'm actually going to index on this card, I'm going to put an entry in vitality. I'll put an entry in relationship. I'll put an entry in value. And I'll put an entry in balance. And each one of those entries will have the entire tagline: vitality, relationship, value, must balance. 4 times I'm going to be writing that tagline. 4 times I'm going to be thinking of the content of this card. This card will now be present in the other side of my brain it goes off and starts doing its own search for matches because it's become engaged. It, it enables me to work with the thoughts on this card as I go through my life, and it enables this information to affect my life. So then, when I'm ready to use this card, the next time I'm looking for something that matches one of these things, I will be able to key in very quickly whether or not this is going to be a good match. Because when I read this, I'll have the whole card back in mind. And if I'm coming up with another word, for example, or like a relationship or vitality that doesn't relate to this card, I'll know it in a minute because I've got that entire tagline. Whereas if I went under value and only had the word value and this address, I know nothing. I have to pull a bunch of cards. I've got maybe 5 or 6 entries in my value index card. I'd have to pull them all if it just said value, 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 or even just value balance or something. If it's a complete thought, it brings back the whole card. So that's, to me, are the values. I engage with the card better by actually making the tagline. It doesn't take as much time as you'd think to write those 4 entries. And the other interesting thing is while I'm doing that, I'm also interacting with the content and engaging my brain as well, making connections. Both sides of my brain are engaged and I'm energized rather than drained. I would say it's just absolutely no question. I would go so far as to say that not putting a complete thought is almost a waste of time because there's so much less value there than the value of having a complete tagline. So I hope you'll get up the courage to try that out. And if you're interested in what this card says, you might be interested in the book that this card comes from. This card comes from a book called The Spiral: How to Sustain a Life That is Self-Sustaining and Momentum Gaining. I'm really enjoying it immensely. The authors of the book are Ken Caputo and Stephanie Ann Roy. And I'll put in the notes where you can find it. It's really quite amazing. And I love the way it provides simple, practical ways to get some really good benefits going in your life without making absolutely ginormous changes. So that's why it got a spot in my Zettelkasten. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.